Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso, and this morning we'll be looking at another discourse of the Buddha from the Anguttara Nikaya. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the discourse and give some explanations. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So the sutta for today is the Pabbajitābhiṇha Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 10, sutta number 48. Which is, the title given here is The 10 Thoughts of a Monk. So this is a sutta which is very commonly recited in Buddhist monasteries, as it's a list of 10 things which the Buddha encouraged particularly monastics to remember every day. But it's interesting to look closely at the exact meaning of each of these phrases, because there's a lot of interesting content here. So, as usual, I'll go through the sutta in Pali and give some translation and explanation, then I'll take questions at the end. So feel free to type in questions at any time. So the sutta begins. The Buddha says, Dasa ime bhikkhave dhamma Pabbajitābhiṇha Sutta. So he says, bhikkhus, there are these 10 things which should be frequently considered or paid attention to by a renunciant, by a Pabbajita. And there's two words here I'd like to focus on for a moment. The first one is Pabbajita. So the word Pabbajita, which is sometimes translated as monk or renunciant, or one who has gone forth, or one who has left home. So the word Pabbajita literally means exile. Literally it means an outcast. So this is exactly the same word that was used for someone who was banished from a town or a city for committing a crime. They were called Pabbajita. And the word which means to give the going forth, the ordination, this verb is Pabbajeti, and that verb also has the meaning of to exile someone, to cast someone out of society. So this already is giving us a bit of a sense. So when we talk about a Pabbajita, we're not necessarily talking about the holy, exalted, reverend monk, so much as we're talking about an exile, an outcast, someone who has willingly set themselves outside of society. And the Pabbajita is not exclusively referring to Buddhist monks. Anybody who was choosing to live a spiritual life outside the ordinary bounds of society was called a Pabbajita during the time of the Buddha. So this instruction, although of course it's particularly targeted at Buddhist monks, it's something which the Buddha was saying is relevant to anyone who has taken on the role of a spiritual exile, someone who has exiled themselves from society for the sake of pursuing a spiritual practice. And so the Buddha says there are these 10 things which a Pabbajita, an outcast, an exile, a spiritual renunciant, should frequently pay attention to. And the verb here, pachavekittabha, comes from the verb ikati, which means to look at something, to see something. And the prefix pati means back or against or repeatedly. And ava means down or thoroughly. So to look at something repeatedly, backwards and forwards and all around. So something which should be contemplated or considered or really examined thoroughly. So there are these 10 things which should be frequently considered by a renunciant, a Pabbajita. And the first one in Pali says, Vevaniyamhi ajupagato. The Buddha says this is the first thought which a Pabbajita should frequently consider, pay attention to, reflect on. So Vevaniyamhi ajupagato. So Vevaniya, it means to be separated from the caste system, to be outside of the social order, outside of the social hierarchy. So it's from the word vanna. The word vanna has a few different meanings. And one of the meanings of vanna means one's caste, one's social class, which during the time of the Buddha there were 4 distinct social classes, 4 distinct castes, which still exist in India to this day. And the Buddha was quite clear that when one becomes a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni, when one becomes a Buddhist monk, then one is no longer part of the caste system. It doesn't matter which of the 4 castes you were born in, which of the 4 castes you were raised in, you're not part of that any longer. You're outside of that system. It's not relevant to you. So this is one very straightforward meaning of Vevaniya, so to become outside of the caste system. We no longer are part of the system of social classes. And this is actually quite important because one of the big problems that we have in Buddhist practice is dealing with our tendency towards self-centeredness. In fact, this is the core issue that we face in Buddhism. And so one who thinks, oh, I'm from a high-class family or a low-class family, therefore I'm better than others or worse than others, these are thoughts which are to be set aside. So when one becomes a renunciant, an exile, a monastic, then one is no longer low-class or high-class or middle-class or anything like that. One is not part of the social class system at all. So the system of social hierarchies is completely irrelevant to us because we've set ourselves outside of that. Another meaning of Vevaniya, so Vanna, besides meaning social class or caste, as I mentioned, Vanna also has the meaning of beauty. So Vevaniya can also mean outside of beauty. So this is another thing when we become monastics, is that since we're taking on a practice of celibacy, then attractiveness and beauty are no longer relevant to us. It's not something which factors into how we relate to ourselves or how we relate to the people around us. So this also means that we don't make any effort to beautify our bodies. So we don't wear any kind of adornments or do anything in particular to make our body look better than it naturally does. So Vevaniya, although it normally is taken to mean being outside of the class system, outside of the caste system, it also does have this meaning of that we're outside the world of beauty. We're no longer involved with the concepts of beauty or attractiveness. Those things have no relevance in our lives. And the word ajupagata means to arrive at or to reach. So we've arrived at a state outside of the caste system, outside of the class system, and also outside of the system of beauty or attractiveness. Then the second one in Pali is parapatibaddha me jivaka. So jivaka means literally one's life, one's vitality. And parapatibaddha, para means other, like other people, and patibaddha means bound to or tied to. So my life is bound to others. And this is something which is particularly important for Buddhist monastics, because as Buddhist monastics we are alms mendicants. We rely upon the support and donations of others for all of our basic needs. So our life is constantly bound to others. We cannot be hermits. We cannot be isolated. We always have to be in association with other people, and that includes association with lay people. We also can't be only around monks all the time. We actually, according to our rules, we have to have some contact with lay people as well. So our life is constantly bound to other people. Being hermits or completely solitary is not an option for us. But there's the deeper meaning here is the interconnectedness of all things, the interdependence of all things, the interrelationship of all things, which also includes our interconnectedness and interrelatedness with other people. So we don't exist as individuals, but rather we're completely integrated into the whole vast scheme of samsara. Then the third one in Pali is Anyo me akapo karaniyo. So anyo means different or altered or changed. And it can also have the meaning of known, by the way. So anyo me akapo karaniyo. Akapo means our conduct, our behavior. And karaniyo means should be done. So anyo me akapo karaniyo means my behavior needs to change. So this is something which we have to constantly reflect on. It's reflecting on the fact that if we're not fully awakened yet, then that means we're doing something which is not the behavior of an awakened being. There's something in our conduct which is not wise, not appropriate. So something needs to change. And one of the major changes is, of course, things like taking on precepts. So as a layperson taking on the 5 precepts, that means you have to change your behavior. You can no longer kill things, not even insects. You can no longer steal things. You need to make sure it's yours to take before you take it. You need to be faithful in your sexual relationships. You can't tell lies. You need to be honest. And also the practice of not using intoxicants, not using alcohol or intoxicating substances of other kinds. So this means, usually for most people, these 5 precepts mean changing our behavior, taking on a different way of being, a different way of acting and thinking. So even more so as one starts to take on renunciant practices, and even more so if one starts to live in a monastery or move towards monastic life. We start radically altering our behaviors and our attitudes and our ways of thinking and speaking because we're trying to change anything in our life that needs to be changed in order to make us progress towards awakening. So there's nothing whatsoever in our life, no particular habit or way of acting, which is worth holding on to if we discover that it's holding us back from awakening. So this willingness to change absolutely anything about our conduct, if we discover that changing it will help us attain awakening more swiftly. Then the next one, Kachinuko me atta silato na upavadati. So this one is a bit more complicated in Pali, so I won't go into a detailed description of the grammar. But briefly speaking, it's saying, is there anything I could criticize myself about regarding my conduct, regarding my behavior? And the word here is sila. So sila means our morality, our sila also means habits, our habitual behaviors. So the point of this one is that once we've taken on spiritual practice, we should be constantly examining our behavior, examining our conduct, and asking ourselves, is there anything flawed in my morality? Do I have any bad habits? Do I have any harmful habits? Any harmful behaviors that need to be altered or changed? Is there anything here that I would criticize? And also, sometimes the way we can relate to that is like, well, what if somebody else was doing what we're doing? Would we criticize it if somebody else was doing it? We start to realize, oh, well, I like to make excuses for myself, but if another monk was doing that, then I would think, oh, that's not so good. Or as a layperson, you're like, well, I do such and such, but then you hear about other people doing that, and you're like, that's not appropriate. That's not quite right. So noticing how we often hold ourselves to different standards than other people. So this also is something to reflect on. And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes we're more forgiving with other people, but then too harsh with ourselves. So there also it's good to consider. Is there something in my behavior and conduct which I need to be more critical about, which I need to be more strict with myself about? But also, are there places where I'm being too strict on myself, where I need to relax a little bit, where that strictness or tightness is ultimately obstructive rather than helpful? So this is a constant investigation. And in the Pali, it's phrased as a question. So it's a question to constantly ask ourselves. So it's an ongoing investigation of our conduct and behavior to see if there's anything here which we think is grounds for criticism. And the next one is related. So the next one says, Kachino komang anuvicha vinyusa brahmachari silato na upavaranti. So this one is similar. This one says, if my wise spiritual companions, after carefully investigating me, would they find any fault with my conduct? Would they criticize my sila? So there's a few important things here. So first off, when it's talking about one's spiritual companion, so it's vinyu sabrahmachari. Vinyu means conscious or sensible or wise. And sa brahmachari means people who are following the spiritual life together with us. So normally in the Pali Canon, the word sabrahmachari means the other monks that you're living with. Or if you're staying in a monastery, it means the other monastery residents. So if you're a lay person staying in a monastery for a period of time, then you're following a certain amount of spiritual renunciant practices, and you're living together with other lay people and monks who are also following spiritual renunciant practices. So thinking about how our spiritual companions, the other monks and lay renunciants that we're living together with, if they knew what we were doing, would they consider it blameworthy? Would they find something? Would they find us to be at fault? Would they find something inappropriate in how we're acting? So again, this is something that we ask ourselves constantly. It's constantly reflecting on our behavior and asking ourselves, would my wise spiritual companions find fault with me about this? And so again, the two critical qualifiers here are vinyu, so sensible or wise companions. So if you have one companion and you know, oh, he's a total fool, his priorities are all backwards, well, he might criticize you because you don't drink alcohol, for example. A foolish person might criticize you for not drinking alcohol. Well, you don't need to worry about that because that's the judgment of a fool. But what's the judgment of a wise person, a wise spiritual companion? That's what's important here. And the other important word here is anuvicha. So anuvicha means having thoroughly investigated or thoroughly examined. So this also indicates that when taking stock of each other's conduct, it's important to look deeply. So not to just get a superficial assessment. So maybe on the surface it looks like someone's behavior is not so great, but on a deeper investigation, on a more careful, thorough examination, we realize that actually their behavior is fine. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe on the surface someone's behavior looks good, but as we investigate and analyze more clearly, we start to realize there's something a bit more sinister going on. So this also is important here. So if our wise spiritual companions were to carefully investigate our behavior, would they find anything blameworthy, anything worthy of criticism? Then the next one is in Pali, Sabbehi me piyehi manapehi nana bhavo vana bhavo. So Sabbehi me piyehi manapehi. So this means from everything that is liked by me, everything that is loved by me, that is pleasing to me. Nana bhavo means becoming different, and vina bhavo means becoming separated. So everything that we love, everything that we like, everything that pleases us is changing and becoming separate from us. And also we are changing and we are becoming separate from that. So this applies to absolutely everything that we like, everything that we enjoy. So whether it's people, our friends and relatives that we like, well, they're changing and they're becoming separated from us. That's just the way reality works. And also we're changing and separating from those people. And also the things that we have. So maybe you have some object that you really like. Maybe you have a glass that you really like, or a robe that you really like, or a hat that you really like, or something. Well, it's important to remember, this thing is going to change, and I'm going to lose it. So maybe you really like that hat, but then one day it gets damaged. Well, it's not the same anymore. You really like it, but then it gets lost, and you don't have it anymore. Or you have a friend who, they've been your best friend since forever, but their attitude starts changing and they start to become intolerable, hard to deal with, hard to be around. Or they just disappear from your life one day. This also happens quite often. As we go through life, we're constantly losing people and meeting people. That's just part of how life works. Things are always flowing in and out of our field of experience. So this reflection then is to help us cultivate an attitude of non-attachment. The willingness to let go of absolutely everything that we like, because the reality is that we're losing it anyway. So being willing to let go is just a way of coming to grips with the reality of things, so that we're not bothered, we don't suffer when we lose things or when they change. Then the next one, this one's a bit longer. Kama sakomi kama dayado kama yoni kama bandhu kama patisarano yang kamang karesami kalyanang va pabakang va tasadayado bivesami. So this is a reflection on karma. So the first one, kama sakomi, kama sako. So my karma belongs to me. So we should remind ourselves, I am the owner of my own karma. So the actions that we make, the choices that we make, those are ours alone. And we are the ones who will receive the results. Next one, kama dayado. So dayada means recipient, one who receives. So kama dayado, we're the recipient of our karma. In other words, whatever karma we do will come back to us. We'll receive the same thing. If we are generous, then we will be the recipients of generosity. If we are cruel, if we are unkind, then we will be the recipients of cruelty, of hostility. So we are the recipients of our karma, of our actions. Kama yoni. Yoni literally means womb. So kama yoni means we are born from our karma. Karma is our birthplace, our origin, our source. So our karma, whatever actions that we make, those are our womb. It's what gives birth to us, literally. That's what produces our life, is our karma. Kama bandhu is the next one. Bandhu literally means bound. So kama bandhu, we are bound to our karma. In other words, inseparable from our karma. We cannot be pulled apart from our karma. It's part of us. It's bound up in our mind. So every action that we do is changing the structure of our mind, the structure of our psyche. So karma is not something separate or outside of us, but it's actually bound up in our own mind. So kama bandhu, we're bound to our karma. So it's actually a fun one also because the Pali word bandhu sounds like bound, which is exactly what it means. And in some contexts, by the way, the word bandhu also means a relative, in the sense that we're bound to our relatives by blood. But in this context, I think the meaning of bound makes the most clear sense. So we're bound to our karma. which is the literal meaning of the word. Then the next one, kamma patisarano. So patisarana, this is another fun one. So the word pati means back or returning, and sarana means running. So kamma patisarana means we're constantly running back to our karma. We're constantly returning to our karma. In other words, you can never escape your karma. Karma is inescapable. If you try to run away from your karma, you'll just find yourself running right back to it. You can't avoid your own karma. So all of this is really emphasizing the importance of being very careful what actions we make. In other words, what karma we make. Because karma belongs to us. We will receive our karma. We'll be on the receiving end of whatever we do. We're born from our karma. So if you want to have a good birth, well, make good karma. We're bound to our karma. So it's inseparable from us. So you want to be bound to something pleasant, so make good karma. And we constantly come back to our karma. We return to it over and over again. So again, you want to return to something enjoyable, something beneficial, not something harmful. So make good karma rather than harmful karma. And this is emphasized by the next statement. So yang kamang karisami, whatever karma I make, kayanang va papakang va, whether it's good or evil, tasadaya dobivisami, I will be the recipient of it. So this is just reflecting again, like whatever I do, if I do good things, I will receive good things. If I do bad things, I will receive bad things. It's a basic understanding of the fundamental principle of karma. Then the next one in Pali is katambu tasame ratindava vitapatanti iti. This one is also fun. So katambu tasame means what has become of me, or what have I become. It's a reflection. It's like we're constantly changing as time goes by. So what have I become? What have I changed into as time has gone by? And ratindava vitapatanti. So ratindava means days and nights, and vitapatanti means constantly falling away, or constantly slipping away. So time is constantly slipping past, and so we reflect, what have I become? What have I developed? What have I developed into? What kind of person have I become as the days and nights have gone by? And it's also reflecting that how well are we using our time? How well are we taking advantage of the days and nights that we have? So right now we have access to Buddhism, access to a good spiritual path. Are we actually taking advantage of that? Have we developed in a good way? Have we taken on the teachings and trainings in a way that have helped us to become better people? So reflecting, what have I become over the course of my practice? And the next one, this is the number 9. So we're almost to the end here. This next one in Pali says, Kachinu ko ahang sunyagare abira mamiti. So this one literally says, do I enjoy empty dwellings? Do I enjoy empty houses? So sunya gara, sunya means empty, and agara means a house, a home, a dwelling place. So do I enjoy empty dwellings? Do I enjoy an empty house? So there's a few ways of taking this. One very literal way is actually just to see, like when you walk in your room, is it clean and sparse, or is it full of a bunch of clutter and junk, a bunch of mess and random stuff? And noticing how the mind feels differently. When you walk into a room that is very sparse, there's very little things there, everything, and the few things that are there are arranged in a neat and orderly manner. Noticing how that affects the mind. It helps the mind to also be a bit more clean and simple and uncluttered. And also how it's a reflection of our mind. If we're prone to hoarding, accumulating a bunch of random junk, filling our living spaces with all the random junk that we accumulate, well then what do you think we're doing with our mind? we're doing the same thing. We're also hoarding and accumulating clutter and junk in our mind, which then is why our mind is such a mess and such a difficult place to live, such a difficult place to meditate, to do anything. So enjoying an empty dwelling is this indication that we appreciate simplicity, we appreciate relinquishment, we appreciate letting go, we appreciate a spacious and uncluttered mind, which then is reflected in appreciating a spacious and uncluttered dwelling place. There's also a deeper meaning here, which is that the term to enjoy an empty dwelling is also understood to mean that one is really enjoying one's meditation practice. Because actually, if your meditation practice is going really well, then you don't need anything at all in order to be happy. You can just go and sit in an empty room and be as happy as a clam, as they say. I don't know if clams are actually happy. I suspect they aren't. I suspect they're suffering just like the rest of us. But we say happy as a clam. So if your meditation is going well, then you can go and sit in an empty room and just be happy as a clam for hours. You can go and sit under a tree and just be ecstatic, euphoric for hours. You don't need anything in order to be happy. So this also is understood that when we say enjoy an empty dwelling, there's also the implication that your meditation practice is going well, because you're getting enjoyment and pleasure from the simple act of meditation practice. So then you don't need external supports. And the final one, this one's another bit complex one, so bear with me. In Pali it says, Atino kome utri manusa dhammo alamari jnana das nevaseso edigato yena hang pachime kale sabrahmachari hi putto namanku bhivisami. Did you get that? Yeah? Made perfect sense? Okay. So atinu kome, so are there for me, utri manusa dhamma, so superhuman things, anything which is superior to ordinary people, ordinary human experience. Alamarya jnana das nevaseso. This is a compound of 5 words. So alang means enough or sufficient. Arya means noble, which in Buddhism is always connected with awakening, stages of awakening. Jnana means knowing, and dasana means seeing, and visesa means distinction or accomplishment. So alamarya jnana dasana viseso means an accomplishment in knowing and seeing, knowledge and vision, which is sufficiently noble. So we're reflecting like, well, and this is something to reflect on in our last days. So it says, Yenahang pachime kale. So pachime kale means in our last days, our last time. So in other words, when we're getting close to death and we start reflecting on our spiritual practice, how our spiritual practice has gone over the course of our life, we ask ourselves, have I made myself something higher than the ordinary human? Have I cultivated a spiritual practice which has led to wisdom and understanding, cultivation of heart and mind, which is noticeably, distinctly above that of ordinary people? So ideally, stages of awakening. This is what this is hinting at. So like, have you really made genuine progress on the path to awakening, ideally to the point where you really have transformed your mind into something really special, that you really have become a spiritually advanced person. And it says, Yena hang pachime kale, such that in my last days, sabrahmachari hi putto, when I am asked about it by my spiritual companions, na manku bhavisami, I will not be embarrassed. So just think, like, if you've been practicing for an entire lifetime and you're on your deathbed and your spiritual companions are saying, oh, how did your practice go during this life? Did you make any progress? And you start thinking about it and you're like, no, yeah, I did pretty bad, actually. In fact, I think I made my mind worse. That would be really embarrassing, wouldn't it? You're like, wow, yeah, I really wasted my life. That would be embarrassing to admit such a thing. But instead, you want to, when you're getting close to your final days and your spiritual companions are asking you, how did your practice go during this life? You reflect and you're like, actually pretty well. Yeah, I made some progress. I really made a lot of effort in cultivating wisdom and compassion and equanimity. And yeah, I actually did make some good progress in that. So then you know you have nothing to be embarrassed about because you've actually made a sincere effort to cultivate the spiritual path. So then you can face death with confidence and ease, knowing that you spent your life well. So these are the 10 thoughts of a monk, the 10 things that an exile, an outcast, a renunciant should frequently consider and reflect upon. So we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello to the people joining in online. Hello to Gita, Ryan, Karuna, Maria, Rebecca, Yankee, Manal, Mike, Victoria. Good to see you, Victoria. Victoria was just here at the monastery for a few days. Hello also to Lydia, Janaki, Bhumika, Mary, and Gregory. Good to see all of you. What I don't see is any questions. So it looks like that's it for the evening. We can go ahead and conclude at this time, and we'll see you next time. So we'll end at this point with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.